Okay, so yes, welcome back. We will continue our discussion on why the Keynesians believe that always trying to balance the budget is not a very good thing. So for that, we will just go back to our diagram, and we are going to see what happens in a recession if you try to balance the budget. So if you try to balance the budget in a recession, uh, you are actually trying to increase your revenue. Okay, you are already in a deficit. There is a recession. The economy is not doing very well, and because of that, the deficit of the government is going up. Now the government tries to balance the budget in this situation. How will the government try to balance the budget? It will try to raise more taxes. It will try to raise more taxes to pay for government spending and the transfer payments that it is making. Okay, so in order to, why does the government have the deficit in the first place? Because there is a recession, and because of the recession the deficit is increasing because the government is paying transfer payments to the people in need. Now the government tries to balance the budget and it raises taxes further. So when it raises taxes further, disposable incomes of the people in the economy go down. Their purchasing power falls. They don't have the income, so they are going to cut their demand even further, and the recession becomes deeper. So in its attempt to balance the budget, the government gives the country deeper recession. Now let's look at what happens above Q2. Now let's say that the government is running a surplus, okay, and it is running a surplus because there is a because there is a boom in the economy. So if there is a boom in the economy and now the government tries to balance the budget, okay, it tries to balance the budget, so it tries to match government spending with the tax. What will it do? It will have to cut down the tax. Okay, so let's say government spending is 50, tax is 100. So the government tries to balance the budget. It can only balance the budget by wiping out this surplus which exists after Q2. So in order to do that, there is just one way. The government have will have to cut the taxes. If the government cuts the taxes, it may achieve the objective of balancing the budget, but cutting taxes means incomes of the people will go up, demand in the economy will rise, and there's going to be runaway inflation. So below the deficit, below the Q2, when there is a deficit and the government tries to balance the budget, the recession becomes worse. And above Q2, if the government tries to balance the budget, the inflation becomes worse. So that's exactly what the Keynesians are saying. They're saying, look, your attempt to balance the budget, maybe it's a good political philosophy and it's driven by all the good intentions in the world, but it ends up making the economy worse off because either you will get a very deep recession or you will get a very high inflation rate. So it's not something desirable. Okay. So now let's look at let's recall what we studied in the first part of this. We said that in a balanced situation, the withdrawals must equal the injections. All right. So what does that imply? It means that net savings, which is the injection, which is the withdrawal, and the taxes, which is also a withdrawal, must equal government spending plus the investment, which are both injections into the economy. All right, so now what we are doing here is simply, instead of saying withdrawals and injections, we are saying savings plus tax must equal government spending plus the investment. Okay, and that is when the economy comes in an equilibrium. Okay, so in the equilibrium, what happens is planned savings plus planned taxes must equal planned government purchases and planned investments. And here is the formula for that: S plus NT, saving plus the tax, must equal government spending and, sorry, that's not T, that's I, and investment. So that's where withdrawal and injections become equal to one another. If we play around with this formula a little bit, we will transfer I to the left side of the equation, S minus I, saving minus the investment, and G minus NT. Why are we doing that? Because investment in the economy is coming from saving, and government spending is coming from the tax that you are charging, that the government is charging. Now look at the right side of the equation. Just by playing around by equation, we actually get the formula for deficit. G minus tax, government spending minus tax. Now that is the budget deficit formula, which you will have. And the more the government increases its spending, okay, the more the government increases its spending, provided the tax rate is the same, the more the deficit will increase. Okay, so sometimes the deficit is a good estimate of the government's fiscal stance. What is the stance of the government? Does the government want to spend more? And what is its stance on the taxes? Sometimes it is, but that's not always necessary. And in this section, we are going to look at why it is not necessary. The deficit in itself is not a good measure of the stance of the government. Okay, the policy of the government, the approach of the government. Okay, the deficit changes for reasons other than government policy. Now, that is one thing that you have to keep in mind, and this will come in handy when you do the evaluation. This is more of an evaluation thing rather than a recall conceptual part. Okay. So, how, if, for example, let's say government spending is at a certain level, tax rate is also at a certain level. Now, the government does not increase the government spending, the government does not increase the spending. What is government spending? It's a direct contribution into the GDP. The government is purchasing things. And it does not reduce taxes. Tax level and government spending is exactly at the same level. It's not changing. So there's no stimulus, positive or negative, from the government. But what happens? Investment drops. Okay, a completely different factor. Investment drops. Okay, when the investment will drop, okay, this will have an impact on the budget of the government. This will have an impact on the deficit of the government. Now this impact on the deficit has got nothing to do with government policy. It is something that has happened outside the government's domain. It is something that has happened because of decision of the businesses. So this does not reflect, even though in the beginning we might get the impression that this is happening because of government policy, but it has got nothing to do with the government policy. Okay, so so this will lead to, obviously, um, when the investments fall, automatically what happens is that the revenue of the government will fall. Why? Because the demand is going to fall in the economy and the deficit is going to rise. Demand in the economy is going to fall, the incomes of the people will fall, and the government will have to pay more unemployment benefits. That's why the deficit will increase. But this is not because of any contractionary policy. The government hasn't reduced its spending, the government hasn't increased its taxes. It's just because of something which has happened because of other businesses taking a decision. Okay, so this is it. Now, please do look at this diagram. This diagram is important to understand what happens. Now, here, what we've done is we've put in the numbers. We've put in the actual numbers. So let's say that the government has uh, decided that it is going to spend 200. Okay, it is going to spend 200 in the economy. The government spending will be 200. Now let's say that the income is 1000 and the tax rate is zero point 0.2. This is the assumption that you will have to make in order to understand this diagram. The first thing is, government policy is, the government's decision is, they want to spend 200 in the economy. That's government spending. Now, when will the budget be in balance? Okay, the budget will be in balance if the expenditure, which is 200, equals to the revenue, which should also be 200. So if the income is 1000, as in this diagram, and the government places a tax rate of 20%, okay, so it's getting an income of 200, it's getting a revenue of 200, which it will spend by way of government spending, and the budget will be in balance. Earning from taxes will be 200, and what it will spend will also be 200. But let's say we don't reach this level of income. Let's say we reach an income level of 800 only. Now look at 800. The government policy is still to spend 200. The tax rate is still 20%. So what is going to happen? At this stage, now multiply 800 by 0.2. You will not get 200. Multiply 800 by 0.2, you are going to get 160. You get 160. Government spending is still, government has decided that its spending will be 200. It gets 150. It gets 160. It spends 200. What is the deficit? 40. So at all incomes below 1000, the government will remain in a deficit. And at all income, now let's say the income is 1200, the government still wants to spend 200 only, so it will tax the same 0.2. So what is 0.2 of 1200? It is 240. It is 240. Now out of that 240, the government spends 200, and 40 is still the surplus. It still has 40 left. So that is the the thing here about this diagram, which you need to understand. And is the policy of the government expansionary here? It may appear that it is expansionary, but in reality, no. The government hasn't cut the tax rates at all. Now, had the government cut the tax rates, then its policy would have been expansionary at an income of 1200. No, the income has gone up of the people. The tax is completely the same, so it does not reflect the fiscal stance of the government. It does not reflect any expansionary fiscal policy on the government's part. Okay, please also remember that inflation needs to be deficit needs to be adjusted for inflation. Okay, the real interest rates that the government is paying, the interest that the government is paying, that has to be adjusted for inflation. Now the government can say that we are servicing the debt at 10%. What does it mean? That let's say the government has borrowed money from the public. Let's say it has borrowed 1 million, and at 10% it is supposed to give at 10% it is supposed to give 100,000. But the inflation rate economy in the economy is um, sorry, the inflation rate in the economy is 10%, and the nominal interest rate is 12%. Okay, so what happens is the 10% inflation is killing the 12% interest rate, and the net gain, the net contribution of the government to the economy is only 2%. So 12% is the nominal interest rate, and you minus the 10% inflation from it to get the real interest rate. And this real uh, 2%, which you minus. So the stimulus in the economy is not the stimulus that the government is giving to the economy is not 12%. It's minus the inflation, it's only 2%. Once again, it does not reflect the stance of the government. It does not reflect the fiscal stance of the government, that it wants to give a stimulus of 12% or 2%, whatever it is. This stimulus is happening because of the impact of the inflation. Okay, so please do keep in mind that a lot of things that happen the government can take the credit for it, that it's happening because of its policy, but that in reality may really not be the case. A lot of things are happening despite the government's policy. Thank you very much.